September 11, 1923, Santiago, Chile. 7:55 in the morning, the scream of jet engines shatters the morning calm. Hawker Hunter fighter jets tear across the Santiago skyline, their shadows racing over streets still quiet with early morning stillness. Inside La Moneda Palace, the neoclassical seat of Chilean government, President Salvador Allende Gossens grips an AK-47 rifle, a gift from Fidel Castro. He wears a military helmet over his characteristic thick-framed glasses. The palace walls tremble violently as the first rockets slam into the building's ornate facade. Stone and plaster explode inward. Windows shatter into deadly rain. Black smoke begins billowing from the eastern wing, curling into the pale morning sky. This is not a foreign invasion. These are Chilean military forces, Chilean pilots, Chilean tanks, attacking their own democratically elected president. But the orders, the planning, the money that made this moment possible did not originate in Santiago. The blueprint was drawn 5,000 miles to the north in Washington, D.C., inside the heavily secured offices of the Central Intelligence Agency. For 3 years, the United States government waged a secret war against Chilean democracy. Economic sabotage designed to starve the population. Propaganda campaigns engineered to turn citizens against their government. Millions of dollars in covert funding flowing to military conspirators and right-wing paramilitaries. All of it focused on one objective: topple Salvador Allende. This is the story of how a superpower systematically destroyed a democracy. The story the CIA tried to bury in classified vaults. Until decades later, the files were declassified, and the truth could no longer be denied. September 4, 1970, Santiago, Chile. The election results send shockwaves through the Western Hemisphere. Salvador Allende, candidate of the Popular Unity Coalition, has won Chile's presidential election with 36.3% of the vote. It is a plurality, not a majority, but under Chilean law, it is enough. Subject to congressional confirmation, Allende will become president. Crowds flood the streets of Santiago in celebration. Workers, students, peasants singing and dancing. Red flags wave above the masses. For the first time in the history of the Western Hemisphere, a Marxist has been democratically elected to lead a nation. Allende is a medical doctor, a career politician, a democratic socialist who has run for president 3 times before. This time, finally, he has won. His vision for Chile is ambitious and radical. Nationalize the country's copper mines, currently controlled by American corporations like Anaconda and Kennecott. Redistribute land from wealthy estates to landless peasants. Expand healthcare, education, and social programs to Chile's poorest citizens. He calls it the Chilean road to socialism. Transformation through democracy, not dictatorship, through ballots, not bullets. To his supporters, Allende represents hope, justice, the possibility that profound change can happen peacefully. But 5,000 miles north, in the White House, Allende's election is viewed as nothing less than a catastrophe. September 4, 1970, Washington, D.C. The same day, President Richard Milhous Nixon receives the news from Chile. His reaction is immediate and volcanic. Within hours, he summons CIA Director Richard Helms and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger to the Oval Office for an emergency meeting. What happens in that room will shape the next 3 years of Chilean history. Richard Helms, a career intelligence officer, takes notes on a yellow legal pad as Nixon issues his orders. Those handwritten notes, declassified decades later, are stark and unambiguous. 1 in 10 chance, perhaps, but save Chile. Worth spending. Not concerned about risks involved. $10 million available, more if necessary. Full-time job, best men we have. Make the economy scream. 48 hours for plan of action. Make the economy scream. The mission is clear. Prevent Salvador Allende from taking office. If that proves impossible, destroy his government from within. The democratic will of the Chilean people is irrelevant. Henry Kissinger, the architect of American foreign policy during the Nixon era, later explains the administration's thinking in a classified memo that becomes public years afterward. I don't see why we need to stand by and watch a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its own people. The logic is pure Cold War calculus. A socialist Chile threatens American corporate interests in Latin America. It threatens regional stability. Most dangerously, it might prove that socialism can succeed through democratic means, inspiring leftist movements across the continent. The domino theory applied to South America. One country falls, others follow. Chilean democracy has just collided with American empire. Democracy will lose. Runtime 3 gig. The CIA immediately activates a two-pronged covert operation with bureaucratic code names that disguise their violent intent. Track 1 and Track 2. Track 1 is the political approach. The goal: prevent the Chilean Congress from ratifying Allende's election victory. Under Chilean constitutional law, when no candidate wins an absolute majority, Congress must choose between the top two finishers. Traditionally, Congress confirms the plurality winner, but tradition can be broken. The CIA has 24 days. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flow into Chile through covert channels. The money goes to bribing Chilean congressmen, funding opposition political parties, paying for propaganda in newspapers and radio stations. The message is hammered constantly. Allende is a communist. Chile will become another Cuba. Democracy is about to die. Vote for the runner-up, Jorge Alessandri, who has promised to immediately resign, triggering new elections. But Track 1 is a long shot. Most analysts believe Congress will follow tradition and confirm Allende, which is why Track 2 exists. Track 2 is so secret that even the American ambassador to Chile is not informed of its existence. The objective is simple and brutal: provoke a military coup before Allende can take office. The CIA activates its contacts within the Chilean military, officers cultivated over years, anti-communist hardliners who view Allende as an existential threat. Weapons are quietly provided, encrypted communications established. Assurances are given: if the Chilean military acts to prevent Allende from taking power, the United States will support them. There is one major obstacle. General René Schneider, commander-in-chief of the Chilean army, is a strict constitutionalist. He has publicly and repeatedly stated that the military will respect the democratic process and will not intervene in politics under any circumstances. As long as Schneider commands the army, a coup is nearly impossible. The CIA and its Chilean contacts reach an obvious conclusion. Schneider must be removed. The plan is to kidnap him, creating chaos that would justify military intervention and allow coup plotters to seize control in the confusion. CIA Station Chief Henry Heckscher receives $250,000 in untraceable cash. Machine guns and ammunition are passed to right-wing Chilean officers and members of the extremist group Patria y Libertad through an intermediary. 3 different groups are working simultaneously on kidnapping schemes, some more competent than others, but all encouraged and equipped by the CIA. October 22, 1970, 8 o'clock in the morning, a residential street in Santiago. General Schneider's official car proceeds toward Army headquarters. Suddenly 2 vehicles box it in, forcing it to stop. Armed men surround the car. They are members of a right-wing conspiracy group equipped with weapons provided through CIA channels. General Schneider, recognizing the kidnapping attempt, draws his service pistol to defend himself. The attackers panic and open fire. Multiple bullets strike the general. The attackers flee, leaving Schneider bleeding in his car. General René Schneider dies 3 days later from his wounds. Chile goes into shock, but the assassination does not produce the desired effect. Instead of chaos leading to military intervention, Schneider's death outrages the Chilean military and the nation. Officers rally around constitutional order in Schneider's memory. The Chilean people view the assassination as an attack on democracy itself. On October 24, 1970, the Chilean Congress votes overwhelmingly to confirm Salvador Allende as president. The margin is 153 votes to 35. Track 1 has failed. Track 2 has backfired catastrophically. Salvador Allende is inaugurated as president of Chile on November 3, 1970, but the CIA's war against him has only just begun. It will simply take a different form, more patient, more insidious, and ultimately more effective. Runtime 6 to 8 November 1970. CIA headquarters, Langley, Virginia. With Allende now in office, President Nixon authorizes a new strategy. The goal shifts from preventing his presidency to destroying it from within. Maximum pressure, invisible hand, plausible deniability. In a National Security Council meeting, Nixon makes the administration's position brutally clear. Our main concern with Chile is the prospect that he can consolidate himself, and the picture projected to the world will be his success. Translation: even if Allende governs successfully, even if his democratic socialism improves Chilean lives without destroying freedoms, his success cannot be permitted. It would prove to the world that there is an alternative to American-style capitalism and Soviet-style communism. It would prove that transformation can happen peacefully.
This is unacceptable during the Cold War.
The CIA receives its mandate: destabilize Chile's economy through every available means. Finance opposition groups, media outlets, and any organization that will undermine Allende's government. Maintain contact with military officers for an eventual coup while keeping American involvement hidden. Above all, ensure plausible deniability. No American fingerprints on any action. The authorized budget is over $8 million, equivalent to approximately $60 million in today's currency. The money is funneled through front companies, intermediaries, and Chilean contacts. The paper trail is deliberately obscured. The timeline is open-ended, as long as it takes. American corporations with interests in Chile quietly cheer. International Telephone and Telegraph, which owns substantial assets in Chile, has already offered the CIA $1 million to prevent Allende's confirmation. The offer was declined as too obvious, but it illustrates the stakes. Anaconda Copper and Kennecott Copper, which together control Chile's most valuable natural resource, know that nationalization will cost them hundreds of millions of dollars. The interests of American business and American national security converge perfectly. Allende must fail, and the CIA has a sophisticated playbook for making democracies fail. Runtime 8 to 12. The CIA understands something fundamental. You do not need to invade a country to destroy it. You simply need to make it unlivable. Chile's economy is vulnerable. The country depends heavily on imported goods, foreign credit, and revenue from copper exports. These dependencies can be weaponized. Before Allende's election, Chile enjoyed robust financial relationships with the United States and international lending institutions. American companies invested heavily. The World Bank and Inter-American Development Bank provided development loans. Private American banks extended credit freely. Chile was considered a stable, creditworthy democracy. Under Allende, the financial spigot abruptly shuts off. The credit blockade is comprehensive and coordinated. World Bank loans to Chile, which averaged over $40 million annually before Allende, dropped to virtually zero. The United States uses its veto power in the Inter-American Development Bank to block loans to Chile. The U.S. Export-Import Bank suspends all credit to Chilean importers. Private American banks, following signals from Washington, drastically reduce lending. The contrast with Chile's neighbors is stark and deliberate. Brazil, ruled by a military dictatorship, receives increased American financial support. Argentina, also under military rule, sees lending expand. The message is clear: democracy that produces the wrong result is punished. Dictatorship that serves American interests is rewarded. Meanwhile, Chile desperately needs foreign currency to purchase essential imports, food, medicine, industrial equipment, spare parts. The credit blockade creates a foreign exchange crisis. The second weapon is copper price manipulation. Copper accounts for 80% of Chile's export revenue. The Chilean economy lives or dies based on copper prices, and those prices are heavily influenced by the actions of American companies and the London Metal Exchange. Under pressure from Washington, global copper prices are driven downward during the Allende years. Simultaneously, Chile faces systematic obstacles in selling its copper. American companies use legal challenges to tie up Chilean copper shipments in European courts, claiming the copper was stolen through illegal nationalization. Insurance companies refuse to cover Chilean copper exports. Buyers are pressured to avoid Chilean products. At the same time, Chile is blocked from purchasing replacement parts for its American-made mining equipment.
Machinery breaks down.
Production falls. The economic tourniquet tightens. The third weapon is creating and exploiting scarcity. The CIA funnels money to Chilean business groups and trade associations, encouraging them to hoard goods, slow production, and maximize disruption. The goal is to create shortages of basic necessities, turning the middle class against the government. October 1972. A Chilean housewife named Maria stands in a bread line that stretches 3 city blocks in a middle-class Santiago neighborhood. She has been waiting for 3 hours. The sun is hot. Her feet ache. Behind her, dozens more wait with the same exhausted patience. When Maria finally reaches the front of the line, the small bakery has run out of bread. The owner shrugs apologetically. "Maybe tomorrow," he tells her. If the flour arrives, Maria walks home empty-handed. Tomorrow she will rise early and try again. This scene repeats across Santiago, across Chile. Lines for bread, for cooking oil, for sugar, for meat, for basic goods that were available and affordable just months earlier. The shortages are partly real, the result of economic pressure and mismanagement, but they are also engineered and amplified. In October 1972, a strike by Chilean truck owners brings the country to a standstill. Trucks do not move. Goods do not flow. Supermarkets empty. Gas stations run dry. The strike lasts for 24 days. The truck owners claim they are protesting government regulations. What they do not mention publicly is the money flowing to them from the CIA, funds that allow them to sustain a strike that would otherwise bankrupt them. Declassified documents later confirm that the CIA provided financial support to the truckers' associations, ensuring they could continue their economically suicidal strike. The strike succeeds in creating the perception of total chaos.
Food rots in warehouses while cities starve.
The middle class, frightened and angry, blames the government. Support for Allende erodes. Within 18 months of Allende taking office, Chile's economy is in crisis. Inflation spirals toward 140%. Black markets flourish. Middle-class savings evaporate. The currency collapses. Store shelves remain empty or nearly empty. The daily struggle to find basic necessities consumes people's lives. The economic warfare is working exactly as designed. Chile is not being attacked by tanks or bombers. It is being asphyxiated by invisible hands. Runtime 12:15:30. Economic pressure creates suffering. Propaganda transforms that suffering into political rage directed at the government. The centerpiece of the CIA's media strategy is El Mercurio, Chile's oldest and most influential newspaper, founded in 1827, read by the Chilean elite and middle class.
An institution that shapes public opinion.
Between 1971 and 1973, the CIA funnels over $2 million to El Mercurio through covert channels. The money ensures El Mercurio's survival despite economic difficulties and allows it to wage a relentless editorial campaign against Allende's government. Every morning, Chileans who open El Mercurio are greeted with headlines designed to generate fear and outrage. Allende government plunges Chile into chaos. Food crisis reaches emergency levels. Communist infiltration of armed forces confirmed. Is Cuba-style dictatorship next for Chile? The coverage is sophisticated, mixing legitimate criticism with exaggeration, distortion, and fear-mongering. Real problems are amplified into existential crises. Government mistakes are portrayed as sinister conspiracies. Allende's every action is framed as a step toward totalitarian dictatorship. The CIA's investment extends beyond El Mercurio. Money flows to opposition radio stations broadcasting anti-government content 24 hours a day. Professional agitators are funded to organize protests. Opposition political parties receive cash to sustain their campaigns. Posters appear on every wall. Pamphlets flood neighborhoods. Grassroots movements that are actually astroturf. Manufactured opposition funded by foreign intelligence. A declassified CIA document from 1972 explicitly states the strategy. The purpose is to generate pressures to bring about regime change through mounting economic problems, loss of support among the middle class, and create an atmosphere favoring military intervention. The propaganda does not need to lie, though it often does. It simply needs to take real problems, genuine grievances caused partly by Allende's policies and partly by CIA sabotage, and weaponize them. Every food shortage becomes proof that socialism does not work. Every protest becomes evidence of popular rejection. Every act of right-wing violence is blamed on government incompetence. By 1973, many Chileans genuinely believe their country is on the brink of collapse, that Allende is destroying democracy, that only the military can save Chile from disaster. They are being psychologically prepared for what is coming. A teacher in Santiago later recalls those years. Every morning, the radio told me my country was collapsing. Every afternoon I stood in lines for food that never came.
Every evening I heard my neighbors talk about military salvation.
We did not understand we were being manipulated. We thought we were thinking for ourselves. This is the genius of sophisticated propaganda. It does not feel like propaganda. It feels like common sense, like the obvious truth, like you reaching your own conclusions based on what you see around you. By mid-1973, even many Chileans who voted for Allende are exhausted,
Frightened, desperate for the chaos to end.
Support for military intervention grows, not because Chileans want dictatorship, but because they want stability, normality, functioning stores and peaceful streets. They do not understand that the chaos was manufactured, that the crisis was engineered, that they are being led toward an abyss. Runtime 15:30:19. While chaos engulfs Chile's streets and propaganda fills the airwaves, the CIA quietly maintains its most important relationships, contacts within the Chilean military. The approach is subtle and patient. The CIA does not directly order Chilean officers to stage a coup. That would be too traceable, too obvious, too legally problematic for plausible deniability. Instead, the CIA creates conditions and provides assurances. CIA officers maintain regular contact with Chilean military officials, particularly those known to harbor anti-communist views or personal ambitions. These contacts are cultivated carefully over months and years. Information is shared, relationships deepened, trust established. The Chilean Navy, historically the most conservative and pro-American branch of the armed forces, receives particular attention. Naval officers train with the U.S. Navy, attend American military schools, develop personal relationships with American counterparts. These bonds become channels for quiet communication. The Air Force, modernized with American equipment and training, also contains officers sympathetic to American concerns about Allende's government. The Army is more divided, with many officers still loyal to the constitutionalist tradition exemplified by the murdered General Schneider. But even in the Army, discontent grows as military budgets shrink, equipment deteriorates, and officers watch economic chaos undermine their country. The CIA's message to its military contacts is carefully calibrated.
No direct orders, no explicit promises.
Simply signals and assurances. If Chile's military were to act to restore order, and constitutional stability the United States would understand. Such action would be viewed sympathetically in Washington. A new Chilean government led by the military would receive American recognition and support. Economic aid, suspended under Allende, would resume immediately. The CIA provides other forms of support. Intelligence reports are shared, highlighting alleged communist infiltration of the Chilean armed forces, creating paranoia and justifying action. Encrypted communications equipment is quietly provided. Lists of government supporters who would need to be arrested after a coup are compiled and shared. Most importantly, the CIA ensures the Chilean military understands that America will not oppose a coup. After the initial failure with General Schneider's assassination, the CIA learns to be more patient, to let internal Chilean dynamics develop, to position itself to support an inevitable conclusion rather than forcing a premature attempt. June 29, 1973, El Tanquetazo, the Tank Uprising, a rogue army unit, the 2nd Armored Regiment, surrounds La Moneda Palace with tanks. Cannons point at the presidential palace. For several hours, Santiago holds its breath. Is this the coup? But the uprising is premature and poorly coordinated. The military high command has not been fully brought into the conspiracy. Loyalist forces, still more numerous, quickly suppress the rebellion. The tank crews surrender. The coup attempt fails. Allende's government treats the rebels with surprising leniency. The officers face minimal punishment, judicial processes that drag on inconclusively. It is a fatal mistake. The message sent to the military is that coup attempts carry little risk. For the CIA and Chilean coup plotters, El Tanquetazo is a valuable test run. It reveals which units can be relied upon, which officers will act, how quickly loyalist forces respond, what tactics work, and which do not. It is a dress rehearsal, and it proves something crucial. The Chilean military is ready to move against Allende.
The institution is fractured.
Enough officers are willing to act. The coup is not a matter of if, but when. The CIA takes careful notes. The next attempt will be better planned, better coordinated, and successful. The final piece falls into place in August 1973, when General Augusto Pinochet Ugarte is promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the Chilean Army. Allende trusts Pinochet, viewing him as a professional, apolitical officer. It is a catastrophic misreading. Pinochet has been cultivated. He is ambitious. He is anti-communist. He is willing. The CIA has its man in the most critical position. Everything is now in place. Runtime 19 Scene 22 Psalm August 1973. Chile is fracturing. The truckers' strike resumes, entering its second month. Critical goods cannot move. Cities face shortages of food, medicine, fuel. CIA funds continue flowing to the strikers, ensuring they can sustain the economically devastating action despite losing income. Armed paramilitary groups from the fascist organization Patria y Libertad escalate their campaign of terrorism. They bomb electrical towers, plunging neighborhoods into darkness. They assassinate pro-Allende officials. They attack government buildings and leftist party offices. They paint graffiti everywhere with a chilling message: Jakarta is coming, Jakarta. The reference is to Indonesia in 1965, where a military coup led to the massacre of between 500,000 and 1 million suspected communists. The message is unmistakable: a bloodbath is coming to Chile. The Chilean middle class, exhausted by shortages and chaos, increasingly views military intervention as the only solution. Opinion polls show eroding support for Allende's government. Even some who voted for him whisper that perhaps the military should restore order temporarily. Allende knows. In speeches, he warns of foreign intervention, of plots to destroy Chile's democratic experiment. He speaks of economic warfare being waged against his government. He is not wrong, but he has no proof he can show, no smoking gun he can present to convince skeptics. And crucially, Allende refuses to arm civilian militias or purge the military of suspected coup plotters. He believes in constitutional order, in democratic processes, in the rule of law. These principles, noble and correct in normal times, become fatal weaknesses during a covert war. September 9, 1973, a secret meeting in Santiago. Admiral José Toribio Merino of the Chilean Navy meets with Air Force General Gustavo Lee and Army Commander Augusto Pinochet. They finalize the coup plans. The date is set, September 11, 1973. The target, La Moneda Presidential Palace. The objective, remove Allende from power by any means necessary, including lethal force if he resists. The plan is comprehensive. The Navy will seize Valparaiso, cutting Santiago off from the coast. The Army will surround key government buildings and seal the capital. The Air Force will provide overwhelming firepower if needed. Communications will be cut. Pro-government radio stations will be shut down. Mass arrests will begin immediately. The lists are ready. Thousands of names, government officials, union leaders, leftist activists, intellectuals, anyone who might resist. They will be detained, interrogated, neutralized. The CIA's station chief in Santiago is informed of the coup timing. He immediately cables Langley. The response from Washington is carefully calibrated. No direct authorization, but no discouragement. Tacit approval through silence. President Nixon and Henry Kissinger are briefed.
They do not order the coup. They do not need to.
They have created the conditions. They have funded the chaos. They have cultivated the military. Now they simply wait for the inevitable conclusion. On the evening of September 10, 1973, Chile has one final night as a democracy. Salvador Allende spends it at his private residence with his family. He knows something is coming. His intelligence services have warned of unusual military movements, cryptid communications, suspicious activity. But he still believes, perhaps naively, that democracy will survive, that the military will respect constitutional order, that Chile is different. He is about to learn how wrong he is. September 11, 1973 runtime, 22:06:27, 5 o'clock in the morning. Valparaiso, Chile's principal port city, 70 miles northwest of Santiago. The coup begins not in the capital, but here, at the headquarters of the Chilean Navy. Naval units seize control of Valparaiso with swift military precision. Telecommunications lines to Santiago are severed. The city is locked down. The trap is set, and the capital does not yet know. 6:20 in the morning, Santiago, the presidential residence. Salvador Allende receives a phone call. The Navy has rebelled. More reports flood in rapidly. Army units are mobilizing throughout Santiago, tanks moving toward key positions, Air Force squadrons preparing for flight operations. It is happening. Allende immediately dresses, gathering his closest aides and security personnel. He does not flee. He heads directly to La Moneda Palace, the seat of presidential power. If there is to be a confrontation, it will happen there at the symbolic heart of Chilean democracy. He arrives at La Moneda around 7 in the morning. Loyalist Carabineros, Chile's national police force, take defensive positions around the palace. Workers from nearby government buildings arrive to defend their president, armed with whatever weapons can be found. Perhaps 40 people in total against the entire Chilean military. Allende contacts Radio Magallanes, one of the few pro-government radio stations still broadcasting. He will speak to the nation 7:55 in the morning. Allende's final address to the Chilean people. His voice, broadcast live as military forces surround La Moneda, is remarkably calm, almost serene. He knows these are his last words. This will surely be the last opportunity I have to address you. The Air Force has bombed the antennas of Radio Magallanes. My words are not spoken in bitterness, but in disappointment. They will be a moral judgment on those who have betrayed the oath they took as soldiers of Chile. I will not resign. Placed in this historic transition, I will pay for the loyalty of the people with my life. And I say to you that I am certain that the seeds we have planted in the consciousness of thousands and thousands of Chileans cannot be definitively destroyed. They have the force, but they do not have the reason. They can dominate us, but they cannot halt social processes, not by crime, not by force. History is ours, and it is made by the people. Long live Chile!
Long live the people. Long live the workers.
These are my last words, and I am certain that my sacrifice will not be in vain. The transmission cuts off. The antennas have been destroyed. 8:30 in the morning. The assault on La Moneda begins. Army tanks roll down Alameda Avenue, Santiago's main thoroughfare, their massive treads tearing up the pavement. They take positions surrounding La Moneda from multiple directions. Snipers establish positions on surrounding buildings, their rifles trained on the palace windows. Soldiers in battle gear create perimeters, sealing off entire city blocks. General Pinochet, commanding from a safe distance at army headquarters, delivers an ultimatum via military radio. Allende must surrender and leave the palace. If he refuses, the military will use all necessary force. Allende's response is transmitted back. He will not surrender. He is the democratically elected president of Chile, and he will not abandon his constitutional post. The time for words has ended. 11:52 in the morning. The bombardment of La Moneda. The roar is deafening. British-made Hawker Hunter jets, piloted by Chilean Air Force officers, many trained by American advisors, scream over Santiago at low altitude. They unleash rocket after rocket at the presidential palace. The explosions are catastrophic. Rockets penetrate the palace walls, detonating inside.
Stone, plaster, wood, glass, metal, everything becomes deadly shrapnel.
Fires erupt immediately, spreading through the historic building. Thick, black smoke pours from shattered windows, creating a pall visible across the city. Inside La Moneda, the world has become chaos. The building shakes with each impact.
Ceiling collapse.
Walls crack. Smoke fills corridors, making breathing difficult. The defenders, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, can do nothing but take cover and wait. Allende, still wearing his helmet and gripping his rifle, moves through the burning palace. He orders his remaining staff to surrender, to evacuate while they still can. His daughters, who came to be with him, are ushered out under white flags. Many defenders surrender, filing out with hands raised to be immediately arrested by waiting soldiers. Allende refuses to leave. He will not surrender.
He will not be captured.
He will not give the coup leaders the propaganda victory of parading him in handcuffs. 1:30 in the afternoon. Military forces storm La Moneda. Soldiers pour into the burning palace from multiple entrances, their automatic weapons sweeping smoke-filled corridors. Scattered resistance is quickly overwhelmed. The remaining defenders are forced to surrender or die. The soldiers fight their way through the palace, room by room, floor by floor, toward the presidential offices. When they reach the Salon Independencia, the formal reception hall converted into Allende's final position, they find the president of Chile dead. He sits slumped in a red velvet chair, his body torn by gunshot wounds. The AK-47 rifle lies beside him. 2 shots. His iconic thick-framed glasses are shattered. For decades, debate will rage. Suicide or assassination? Did Allende take his own life rather than surrender, or was he murdered by soldiers who claimed suicide to avoid responsibility? In 2011, after years of investigation, forensic experts conclude definitively suicide. The trajectory of the bullets, the powder residue, the physical evidence all confirm it. Salvador Allende, facing capture by forces seeking to destroy everything he built, chose death over surrender. But the method of death is almost beside the point. Suicide or murder, Salvador Allende was killed by the coup, killed by the Chilean military officers who betrayed their oaths. Killed by the CIA operatives who funded and encouraged the conspiracy. Killed by the American officials who decided Chilean democracy was expendable. By mid-afternoon on September 11, 1973, La Moneda Palace stands in ruins, smoke still rising from its shattered walls. Salvador Allende is dead. Chile's democracy is dead, and a nightmare is about to begin. Runtime 27:30. Within hours of Allende's death, the military junta, led by General Augusto Pinochet, takes complete control of Chile. The repression is immediate and systematic. Mass arrests sweep through Santiago and every major city. Thousands are detained in the first 48 hours. The National Stadium, Chile's largest sports venue, is converted into a detention center. Political prisoners are herded onto the field where crowds once cheered soccer matches. Now it witnesses interrogations, torture, executions. Leftist activists are hunted door to door. Union leaders disappear. Allende government officials are arrested. University professors, journalists, students, anyone suspected of supporting the popular unity government becomes a target. Summary executions begin immediately. Bodies appear in rivers, on roadsides, in morgues with signs of torture. The exact death toll in the first weeks will never be fully known, but it numbers in the thousands. All leftist media is shut down. Newspapers closed. Radio stations silenced. Books considered subversive are burned in public bonfires. The junta imposes total censorship. Only approved information can be broadcast or published. A strict curfew is enforced with shoot-on-sight orders. After dark, the streets belong to the military. Anyone outside faces immediate execution. Santiago becomes a city of fear, where families hide behind locked doors, where the sound of trucks means soldiers are coming, where neighbors disappear and no one dares ask questions. Meanwhile, in Washington, the response is swift and supportive. American corporations whose assets Allende nationalized celebrate openly. ITT, Anaconda Copper, Kennecott Copper, they all immediately begin negotiations with the new military government for favorable compensation and renewed operations. Declassified CIA cables from the days following. The coup show officers in Santiago reporting back to Langley, mission accomplished. The exact phrasing in one cable: the Chilean armed forces have acted to restore order and prevent civil war. All primary objectives achieved. No American fingerprints on the trigger, but American hands all over the gun that made it possible. The United States officially recognizes Pinochet's military junta within weeks. Economic aid frozen under Allende resumes immediately. Military cooperation expands. Training programs for Chilean officers suspended during the Allende years restart with increased funding. The Pinochet regime will last 17 years, from 1973 to 1990. During that time, more than 3,000 Chileans will be murdered or disappeared. Over 40,000 will be tortured in secret detention centers operated by the DINA, Pinochet's intelligence service. 200,000 Chileans will be forced into exile, fleeing political persecution. All political opposition will be systematically eliminated. Trade unions crushed.
Universities purged.
Free speech abolished. Chile becomes a laboratory for radical free market economic reforms. American-trained economists, the so-called Chicago Boys, disciples of Milton Friedman, implement shock therapy capitalism. State industries are privatized. Labor protections eliminated. Social programs gutted. The Chilean economy is restructured to maximize foreign investment and corporate profit. Milton Friedman himself visits Chile and advises Pinochet. When criticized for supporting a dictator, Friedman argues that economic freedom will eventually lead to political freedom, that capitalism and democracy are inseparable. The Chileans being tortured in DINA's secret prisons might disagree. For 17 years, Chile lives under dictatorship. The democracy dies so capitalism can thrive, built on a foundation of corpses. Runtime 30:32. For decades, the CIA's role in destroying Chilean democracy remains partially hidden. Suspected by many, alleged by survivors, documented in scattered evidence but never fully proven, American officials deny direct involvement. The CIA did not orchestrate the coup, they insist. Technically true in the narrowest possible sense. The CIA did not command Chilean officers to attack La Moneda on September 11, 1973, but in the year 2000, under pressure from human rights organizations, victims' families and declassification laws, the CIA is forced to release 24,000 documents related to Chile. The files reveal everything. Direct funding to Chilean military officers planning the coup, detailed operational plans for economic destabilization explicitly designed to create conditions for military intervention, communications showing CIA officials were informed of coup timing and expressed support, evidence of post-coup assistance to Pinochet's intelligence services. The money flows are documented. The propaganda campaigns are confirmed. The military cultivation is proven. The CIA's war against Chilean democracy is no longer allegation or conspiracy theory. It is documented historical fact. A CIA internal report, released as part of the document dump, contains a carefully worded admission. The CIA actively supported the military junta after the overthrow of Allende, but did not assist Pinochet to assume the presidency. It is a masterpiece of bureaucratic non-denial. The CIA helped create the conditions for the coup, funded the chaos that made it inevitable, cultivated the military officers who executed it, supported the dictatorship that followed, but claims it did not directly assist Pinochet's rise. President Bill Clinton, upon the document release, issues a statement. It is important that we know as much as possible about the actions of the United States in Chile. The declassification of these documents will help Chileans and all of us move forward with a full understanding of the past. But the damage is permanent and irreversible. 3,000 murdered,
40,000 tortured,
200,000 exiled,
an entire generation traumatized,
a democracy destroyed, and the precedent firmly established. American interests override democratic sovereignty. Elections are legitimate only when they produce acceptable results. Democracy that threatens American corporate profits or geopolitical strategy can be dismantled through covert action without accountability. The Chile operations becomes a blueprint used across Latin America in the following decades. Guatemala, Brazil, Argentina, Nicaragua, the pattern repeats with variations. Democracies that displease Washington face economic pressure, media manipulation, military cultivation. Some survive, many do not. These tactics did not end with the Cold War. Modern disinformation campaigns, economic sanctions weaponized for regime change, covert support for opposition movements, all echo the strategies perfected in Chile in the early 1970s. Runtime 32 to 34. Present day. Santiago, Chile. La Moneda Palace. The palace has been restored, its bullet scars plastered over, its fire damage repaired. It stands elegant and imposing once again. Tourists photograph its neoclassical facade. Inside, Chile's democratically elected presidents work in offices that once filled with smoke and blood. A memorial plaque marks the spot where Salvador Allende made his last stand. Fresh flowers are always present, left by Chileans who remember, who refuse to forget. Chile recovered its democracy in 1990 when Pinochet finally relinquished power, though he secured amnesty for himself and his officers as the price of stepping down. The country has rebuilt its democratic institutions, prosecuted some human rights abusers, compensated some victims, but the scars remain. Families still searching for disappeared loved ones, survivors still carrying the psychological wounds of torture, a society still processing collective trauma. The debate over Allende and Pinochet still divides Chile. Some view Allende as a visionary martyr. Others blame him for mismanaging the economy and provoking the coup. Some view Pinochet as a savior who rescued Chile from communism. Others see him as a murderer whose crimes can never be justified. The wounds have not fully healed. Perhaps they never will. And in Washington, in the CIA's archives, thousands more pages remain classified.
Other operations.
Other democracies targeted, other covert wars waged in the name of American interests. How many files remain sealed? How many operations have never been exposed?
What would we discover if every document were made public?
The story of Chile is not just history. It is a warning. When powerful nations decide that democracy is acceptable only when it produces acceptable outcomes, no democracy is truly safe. When corporations and intelligence agencies can covertly dismantle elected governments without accountability, democratic sovereignty becomes meaningless. When economic warfare and propaganda can turn citizens against their own democratic institutions, the fragility of self-governance is exposed. Salvador Allende believed that profound transformation could happen peacefully, democratically through ballots rather than bullets. He believed that socialism and democracy were compatible, that a better world could be built through constitutional means. He was killed for that belief. Not because his vision was impossible, but because those with more power refused to let him prove it was possible. And that is perhaps the greatest tragedy of Chile 1973. We will never know if Allende's democratic road to socialism could have succeeded, because he was never allowed to try. The experiment was sabotaged from the beginning, strangled in its cradle by covert operations launched from Washington. The jets that bombed La Moneda were Chilean. The soldiers who stormed the palace were Chilean. The finger that pulled the trigger on the rifle that killed Allende was Chilean. But the coup itself, the destruction of Chilean democracy that bore the invisible stamp, made in the USA. In 2013, the Chilean government officially concluded that Salvador Allende died by suicide during the military assault on La Moneda palace. The full extent of CIA involvement in Chilean affairs from 1793 remains partially classified. Augusto Pinochet died in 2006 without facing full accountability for human rights violations. The debate over Chile's past continues.